Hi, I'm Sherry with Garden Gate Magazine, and today we're here with Gene Rozenboom in Portland, Oregon, to see his beautiful garden filled with Japanese maples and dwarf conifers. Gene, thanks so much for having us.
Oh, it's a thrill to have you here.
Yeah, it's been so fun. I learned a lot from you today about the difference between dwarf and miniature conifers. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I have a lot of different conifers in the garden, but I have the majority of conifers are dwarf conifers. And dwarf conifers grow between 1 and 6 inches a year, which is a huge spread. If a dwarf only grows an inch a year, then it grows very slowly and really is in most people's mind a true dwarf. But there are also dwarfs that grow 6 inches a year, which is quite substantial, and a plant can get very big. And a lot of people, like my mother or other people, have come to me and said, I bought a dwarf conifer, but it's huge. Well, the reason it's huge is because it's in the upper range of that dwarf category, and so it can grow quite quickly. A miniature conifer, though, will always remain tiny because it only grows less than an inch a year.
Yeah, I've seen a few of those here. They're really neat.
Yeah, I have a number of them that only grow 1/4 of an inch a year, which is really slow, but I love them. They have so much character, and they just really will never outgrow its space.
Yeah, I like that idea. That's really great. Now, you were telling me about a conifer that you love just over here. So can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah, it's kind of a fascinating plant because it goes through some transitions during the year. This is a dwarf Norway spruce, and usually Norway spruces are huge trees. They're 40, 50 feet tall. But this is a dwarf cultivar that only grows about 3 or 4 inches a year. And what's fascinating about this particular plant is when the cones come out in the spring, they come out bright red. And so it's really fascinating to see, you know, this bright color on a conifer in the spring for about 6 weeks. And then it matures to this light brown color. And you can see it's just a little tiny pine cone, but it makes for a great decoration on a package at Christmas time.
I can
it's
see
really,
that.
really pretty. Most people have never seen a pine cone this small before. But it's really a fascinating plant.
And it's really nice that it's up this high. This stone wall is beautiful. How did that come to be, the big wall?
When we first got the property about 10 years ago, it was really a dilapidated property. The plant materials were thorny and they had outgrown their life. And so the soil line of the mountain here came down to the house, and actually the soil line was above the wood siding. And so the wood was rotting. So we excavated all the soil that was in this area, and then it left a place where we could build a wall, and we had this stone wall built by a father-son team, and they really did an artful way of creating it. It's dry stacked, it's not mortared, it's just held in place by the weight of the stones.
Wow.
And that allowed me to put some dwarf plants at eye level. And what's interesting is there's a category that's smaller than a dwarf, and that's a miniature. For example, this is a miniature Mugo pine.
Wow.
It only grows about 1/4 of an inch a year.
Oh, that's impressive.
And it's just that plant is 11 years old, and I just love it. I think it's just a delightful plant to take a look at.
Yeah, and you can really see it, well, because it's up there. You can see it really well.
Right, it's at eye level, and next to it is a dwarf elm tree, and that elm tree is also 11 years old, and you can see how tiny the leaves are. I mean, they're the true miniature.
That is really amazing. So you have these beautiful conifers, but I know you have Japanese maples too. In fact, we're standing under a really nice one. And there are miniatures of Japanese maples also, or dwarfs?
So I'm fascinated with Japanese maples, and it really is a passion of mine. And most people only think there's 2 kinds of Japanese maples. There's a green one and there's a red one. But that couldn't be farther from the truth. And really there's a huge variety of Japanese maple, and they're very interesting. This maple that you're standing behind is called a rough bark maple, and it has a really rough bark. So in the winter, even though the tree loses its leaves, it has a very interesting bark to look at.
Nice.
This plant here is a dwarf Japanese maple. It was planted the same time as this Japanese maple.
Wow. Yeah.
So you can really see that there's a difference in size. But not only that, but you can see the texture and the growth habit of this particular Japanese maple is very different than what most people think of when they think of a Japanese maple.
Yeah. Now, do they get fall color?
they get beautiful fall color, and it varies. Japanese maples do not lose their leaves all at the same time. So
Okay.
if you have a different cultivar. So this one will lose its leaves later than this one. This one will lose its leaves sometime in October. This one will lose it in early November.
Okay.
But they vary in color. There's some that are red, some that are orange, some that are yellow, some that are a combination of those colors. But really, fall color is spectacular
nice.
on a Japanese maple.
Oh, cool. And I bet this area looks great in the winter. It's
You know, there are also Japanese maples that have winter interest. The rough bark maple is one, but there's another Japanese maple that's up here that the twigs turn red in the winter.
Oh, neat.
And so you have this vivid red color in the winter, even though it loses its leaves.
Very nice. Gene, I love these ferns that you have along the wall here. What kind are they?
Well, you can't have a garden in Oregon without ferns. And so there's a variety of ferns that are here.
Yeah.
There are some that are native to the Northwest, but there's also some exotic ferns from Japan or China.
Oh, nice.
And so there's a variety. And
then,
next to the ferns, where it's more sunny, there's some horsetail.
Okay.
And horsetail, to me, is a very architectural plant. There's no leaves on it. It's just sticks standing straight up.
Yeah.
But what I like about it is we created this beautiful rock wall, and even though there's a plant here that's taller than the wall, you can see through it and still see the wall
That
and
is
the features of the wall.
That's a great feature. I like that. That's
Luckily,
really nice.
in this particular instance, because this particular plant spreads very rapidly, is it can't spread because of the sidewalk and the wall. It's kind of tied in.
It's contained.
It is contained.
That's good.
And then right across from the horsetail is a plant that people would not think of that this is a conifer.
Yeah, I was
But
amazed.
this is a conifer from New Zealand and Australia. It's called podocarpus, and it has this nice blue color and really makes a great hedge.
Oh, yeah.
And is a beautiful plant.
It looks perfect. I
It's
love
never
the color.
produced a pine cone, but it is a conifer.
They're very nice. It's beautiful. I love the color.
Yeah.
And then here, I think you said you have several Mugo pines.
So yeah, this is kind of an example of what I mean by a dwarf pine getting out of control. So I have 3 different Mugo pines here. This Mugo pine here grows a good 6 to 7 inches a year. And you can see it's big. Planted the same year was this Mugo pine, which only grows maybe 2 or 3 inches a year. And you can see it's much smaller.
Yeah.
And then there's a Mugo pine in the background there that grows maybe 4 inches a year. So you can really see the difference in growth habits, even though they're all named a dwarf Mugo pine.
Yeah. So are they different varieties?
They are. They're each a different cultivar.
Okay. Nice. Well, maybe we can wander around here and see some Japanese maples I think that you have. As we were coming around the path, Gene, I couldn't help but notice the beautiful seeds of this Japanese maple. It's so pretty.
This is one of my favorite Japanese maples. This is called Amber Ghost, is the cultivar name. And it is a very interesting plant because it has 3 seasons that different colors. So in the spring, when it first comes out in May, it's this brilliant pink peach color that is just amazing.
Oh, nice.
For 6 weeks, this is just a big giant flower. And then it turns this green color. But in June, it gets these red seed pods, and they're
so pretty.
bright red. And they really contrast with the green of the leaf. But what's interesting about this particular plant is in November, when most trees have lost their leaves, it still has its leaves in early November.
Wow.
And it turns a brilliant red. And it's just
Wow.
spectacular. And because of that, a lot of people come to the garden and say, oh, I want to come see your garden in the fall because I want to see all the maple colors.
Yeah.
But it doesn't quite work very well because each of the cultivars of maples turn color at different times in the fall.
Oh, okay.
And so it's really difficult for someone to come to the garden and really get the full impact with just one visit.
Yeah.
But in the spring, all the Japanese maples leaf out at the same time. And I think they actually have a more intense color and a more interesting color, but you have all of them turning color at the same time.
That's
and
really
it's
neat.
spectacular in the spring.
We need to come back.
Well, it's interesting because most people think fall is the time to see
Yeah.
it, but I think spring is a
Spring
better
is the
time to come
Yeah.
see it.
Very nice. And then you have this variegated one behind you, which is
Right.
really
So this
cool.
is a cultivar called Shiraz, and it has a variegation. In the spring, it comes out a brilliant pink again, similar to this one. And so the trees, two trees here together, it's just a riot of color. It's really
bet.
spectacular.
Very beautiful. Very nice. Well, I want to just take a peek at this little fall combo you've got going on here too, because it's so pretty, especially in the setting sun and with the grass. It's really nice.
The sun's kind of going away, but this is a big blue stem from the prairies in the Midwest, and it's called Blackhawk is the cultivar name. And it's really a beautiful grass that has kind of a black color to it, but it also has some red tones and some, as you said, fall colors to it.
Yeah.
It's really a spectacular grass for the landscape because it remains erect. It grows up. Like some grasses kind of flop
they really
over,
do, yeah.
and they just don't look very good this time of the year. But this maintains an upright appearance throughout the season.
That's great. And what's the do you know the zinnia, or is just one of the low-growing ones?
It is a low-growing one, and I'm sorry I don't remember.
That's okay. I'm sorry I put you on the spot. No worries.
But I love orange, and so
It's a great combo. I love it.
It's really
Filling this sunny spot really well.
Yeah.
That's great. And what's this redbud you have? I didn't even recognize it when.
This is a very unusual redbud. I know redbuds are popular in the Midwest because I grew up in the Midwest, and we have redbuds on our farm, which are spectacular.
Yeah.
Most redbuds have a light green leaf, and it's very thin. This is a very different cultivar of redbud. It's called Little Woody, and the leaf is very leathery. It's kind of crinkly, but it's very architectural and sturdy, and it's also a dark green color.
Very pretty.
And I prefer the dark green redbud to a light green leaf.
And then does it have the same kind of purpley pink flowers?
It does have a purple pink flower, but it's not as spectacular as some of the redbuds that people have in the Midwest.
Interesting.
But I like this better because for the whole year, this puts on a better show.
Yeah. And it has a pretty trunk too. That bark is nice.
Yeah.
So I bet that looks good in the winter as well.
Yeah, no, it's really a handsome tree.
I think so. I could not help but notice the fragrance over here of the peanut butter tree. Is that right?
Yeah, so this is kind of common in Oregon. It grows very quickly and very readily. The peanut butter, if you rub the leaf and then you smell it, it smells like peanut butter.
It really does.
I mean, it's amazing.
Really fun.
I mean, it's surprising. But it blooms in the fall and early or late summer.
Yeah.
And we have it right here next to the deck because it has this jasmine-like fragrance
Very nice.
that comes from the bloom, and it just permeates the air.
Yeah.
And when you're on the deck, it just smells delightful.
Nice. Does it have berries or anything?
It does. It has a strange berry that's purple and pink. You can't see it right now, but in the winter, it does have a kind of an interesting berry as well.
Nice. Will the birds eat it or?
No, the birds don't eat it.
Just good looking.
Yeah.
So out here in the front yard, I see you have some really nice Japanese maples, and I'm kind of amazed at the different habits that.
Sherry, I'm telling you, Japanese maples are so varied. This is an example. This Japanese maple is about 11 years old.
Wow.
And it only grows to be about the height of a tabletop. In fact, that's the nickname for this particular plant.
Oh, okay.
Is it's a tabletop maple. And this is a single trunk tree, but it just continues to grow out.
That's so cool.
And it really has a unique habit. This tree here, this is a very unique Japanese maple. If you look at this Japanese maple, the first thing you're going to notice is it has a vase shape, which is very different than a traditional Japanese maple that has this oval round shape.
Yeah.
In addition to the shape of the structure of the tree being different, it also has a very different leaf growth. You can see the leaves are very congested. They're very tight together. And some people have nicknamed this particular plant a lion's mane maple because they think it kind of looks like a lion's mane.
I can kind of see that.
One of the reasons we have it here in the entry is because it's the last tree that turns color in the fall.
Oh.
So at Thanksgiving here in Oregon, this plant still has color. It still has its leaves, and it's a beautiful plant that really lightens up the landscape when
Nice.
it's dreary.
Yeah.
out.
That would be great. That's great. So maybe we can take a little walk up to the
Sure.
slope. I think
Okay.
you have some really cool plants up there.
Sure,
We talk
sure.
about. Well, we made it to the top.
Yeah,
This is quite a slope.
we are on a mountain.
Yeah.
And luckily, when we did the remodel of the landscape, we moved some of the soil to create some flat areas because there were no flat areas.
Yeah.
In fact, this area here was not flat. And I dug up the ground one wheelbarrow at a time and took it down
Wow.
and created this flat
Yeah.
area for our vegetable herb
Nice.
garden.
Well, that looks really good. But really eye-catching is this kind of, it looks like a topiary, but you're saying it's not.
It's not. This is pretty amazing. Dwarf conifers usually start out as a witch's broom.
Okay.
That's far up in the tree, and someone collects it and then they propagate it to create a plant.
Nice.
This is a witch's broom. It grows naturally. I've never pruned this.
That's
it
cool.
grows like a ball, like mistletoe or something like that.
Uh-huh.
But it's grafted onto a different rootstock.
Oh, cool.
So
Okay.
the stem of the plant is actually from a different tree,
Mhm.
and then they grafted on a portion of this plant, and it just naturally grows into a ball. I mean,
Well-
it's really fascinating. I don't have to prune it.
That's really a big
No
plus.
maintenance.
Yeah. And with all your conifers, it seems like that they're pretty low maintenance, aren't they?
Totally low maintenance.
Yeah.
Because they're dwarf, they don't get out of hand. I don't have
Yeah.
to prune them. I don't have to do anything. And because of the steep mountain that I have,
Mhm.
I don't have to get on the mountain
Yes.
to take care of the plants that are on it.
That's a big plus.
Yeah.
That's a big plus. And then you have this low Japanese maple, which is kind of
So
amazing.
along the threads that Japanese maples have a huge variety.
Yeah.
This is actually a ground cover. It only grows to be about 2 to 3 inches off the ground.
Oh, wow.
But there's a stump here, and so it's
Oh.
covering up a stump, and that's why it looks like it's a
got
mound.
a mound.
But you can see it just grows along the ground, and it's just
Cool.
a ground cover.
That's really neat. Does it get fall color too?
It does. It's a
And-
spectacular color in the
And
fall.
how about spring?
Spring, not so much.
Okay, so that was mostly a fall
With this
one.
one,
Yeah.
the coloration is in the fall.
Nice. That's very cool. And then you have sort of just a lot of different ones. Are these all dwarfs and miniatures?
So this is a display garden that really kind of highlights the differences in colors, shapes, textures, growth habits. You can see the huge variety
Yeah.
for a dwarf conifer garden. And really, for a person who has a small garden,
Mm-hmm.
it's fun to have a number of dwarf conifers because you can have a lot of plants in a
Yeah.
small amount of space. And it really has a lot of
Yeah.
interest,
And-
both in the summer and in the winter,
Yes.
which is key because I like to have things that look good in the
Yeah.
winter.
Yeah, and they're low maintenance.
Oh,
So
yeah, I haven't touched
like-
these things
I love
since I
it.
planted them.
That's really neat. I could not help but notice is that a variegated conifer?
So yes, that's a Japanese white pine, and it has a variegation on the foliage. So it has
Wow.
a yellow and green color to the stems. And I just think it's a fascinating plant. And as I mentioned to you once before, I cut the branches and put them on packages for decoration.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Yes.
it's such a change
Mhm.
from just plain green.
Yeah. Yeah.
Material.
That would be fascinating. Yeah.
It's really interesting.
That's very fun.
Yeah.
Very fun. Well, Gene, thank you so much for taking us through your garden.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
It's a beautiful place, and
Thank you.
I learned a lot. So
Oh, good.
thank you for sharing your knowledge.
You're welcome.